Ethan Cole had lived alone so long that silence felt like a second skin. His small farm sat at the edge of the dry valley, where grass fought hard to grow and the wind carried dust instead of hope. Years earlier, the land had held laughter, a woman's voice, a child's footsteps, but war, sickness, and time had taken those things away one by one. What remained was work routine and the slow passing of days measured by sunrise and sunset. Ethan spoke to no one most weeks except his horse, and even then only when the quiet pressed too hard on his chest. He did not hate people, he simply no longer expected anything from them. The world had taught him that lesson well. So he farmed, repaired fences, and slept early, letting the past stay buried where it belonged. He believed this was how the rest of his life would pass unnoticed and unchanged. The day everything shifted began like any other, with heat already rising from the ground before noon. Ethan rode into town to trade grain and buy supplies, keeping his head down as usual. The town was louder than he liked, voices sharp and restless. Something was wrong, and he felt it before he saw it. A crowd had gathered near the trading post, and men whispered with the kind of interest that carried cruelty. Ethan asked no questions, but followed the sound until he reached the center of it. There, tied beside a wagon, stood a woman, thin, exhausted, and bruised, her dark hair hanging loose over her shoulders. She wore the signs of someone who had been dragged across too many miles with no choice in the matter. The trader spoke loudly, claiming she was the last of her people, left behind unwanted and unwanted again. Men laughed and argued over her value as if she were livestock. Ethan felt a tightness grip his chest when he had not felt in years. He tried to turn away, telling himself it was not his fight, that he had no place interfering with the cruelty of the world. But when the woman lifted her head, their eyes met, and something inside him broke open. There was no begging in her gaze, no anger, either, only a deep, tired strength, and the quiet acceptance of someone who had already lost everything. Ethan remembered that look from a mirror long ago. Without fully understanding why, he stepped forward and asked the trader what he wanted. The price was steep, meant to scare off pity and curiosity alike. Ethan hesitated only a moment before agreeing. Coins changed hands, and the crowd lost interest, disappointed that entertainment had ended so quickly. The trader untied the woman and shoved her forward. Ethan caught her before she fell, steadying her with a gentleness that surprised them both. They rode away from town in silence, the horse slow beneath the weight of two lives moving toward an uncertain future. Ethan did not know what to say, and she did not speak. When they reached the farm, he helped her down, offering water and food without asking anything in return. She ate carefully, as if unsure the meal would not be taken from her. When she finished, she looked at him and finally spoke. Her name was Ayanna. Her voice was soft but clear, carrying a quiet pride that had not been broken. Ethan told her his name and nothing more. He showed her the small cabin, the extra blanket, the place by the fire where she could rest. He told her she was safe here and that no one would take her away. He did not say what she owed him, because the idea made his stomach turn. He simply said she could stay as long as she wished. That night, Ethan lay awake, listening to the sounds of another person breathing under his roof. It filled the space in ways he had forgotten were possible. Memories stirred, both painful and warm, and he fought them back, unsure what tomorrow would bring. In the days that followed, Ayanna moved slowly, at first learning the land, watching the animals, and helping where she could. She did not ask questions, and Ethan did not offer explanations. Trust grew quietly between them, built on small acts of respect and shared work. She carried sorrow like a shadow, but also resilience like fire hidden beneath ash. Ethan found himself speaking more, laughing once or twice without meaning to. The farm felt different, alive again, though nothing physical had changed. At night they sometimes sat by the fire, not speaking, but not alone either. Ethan realized that buying Ayanna had not been an act of ownership, but a beginning he did not yet understand. He had brought another wounded soul into his life, and in doing so stirred his own scars awake. The world outside the farm remained harsh and dangerous, but within its boundaries something fragile and powerful was taking root. Neither of them knew what shape it would take, only that silence no longer ruled the land completely. This was how the story began, not with chains, but but with a choice and the quiet courage to step toward the unknown instead of away from it. Life on the farm settled into a careful rhythm shaped by patience and unspoken understanding. Ethan did not give orders, and Ayanna did not wait for permission. She rose with the sun as he did and learned the land quickly, reading soil, wind, and animals with a skill born of memory rather than teaching. She helped mend fences, grind grain, tend the small garden, and care for the horse with a gentle confidence that eased Ethan's long habits of solitude. Words came slowly between them, but silence no longer felt empty. It felt shared. At times Ethan caught himself watching her move across the field, steady and focused, and felt a quiet respect grow inside him. She was not weak or lost as the men in town had believed. She was surviving, and survival carried its own dignity. Ayanna still woke some nights startled by dreams of fire and shouting. Ethan learned to recognize the sound of her breath changing before fear took hold. He never touched her without invitation, but he would sit nearby, speak softly of the morning chores or the weather until her shaking eased. She never spoke of what she had endured, and Ethan never asked. He understood that some wounds healed only when given time and space. In return, Ayanna noticed the way Ethan sometimes went still, staring at nothing when the past crept close. She would place a cup of water near him or ask about the crops, grounding him back in the present. Without naming it, they were learning how to protect each other. The outside world did not forget them, though. One afternoon, riders passed too close to the farm, and Ethan watched until they disappeared over the ridge. That night he checked the locks twice and cleaned his rifle, though he hoped never to use it again. Ayanna noticed and asked quietly if danger would come. Ethan answered honestly, saying the West was never gentle to those who did not fit its rules. He promised her that if anyone came, he would stand between them and harm. Ayanna looked at him a long moment, then said she would stand with him, not behind him. The words carried weight and choice, and Ethan felt something shift between them. This was no longer a rescue, but a partnership forged in shared risk. As days passed, Ayanna began to speak more of her people, not of their end, but of their lives, the songs. They sang the stories told by firelight, the way they honored the land. Ethan listened with an attention he had not given anyone in years. He realized how little he had understood about the world beyond his own losses. Ayanna asked about his family, and he told her in careful pieces about his wife taken by illness, his child lost to the same cruel fate. His voice broke once, and he did not hide it. Ayanna listened without pity, only understanding, and when he finished she placed her hand over his heart briefly and respectfully. That simple touch carried more comfort than any words could have. The town remained a place of tension and whispers. When Ethan rode in alone to trade supplies, he heard talk of the Apache woman on his land. Some men mocked, others warned him he was inviting trouble. Ethan ignored them, but he felt the eyes following him. He returned home faster each time, grateful when the farm came into view, and Ayanna stood waiting, calm and watchful. The land itself seemed to recognize their bond, the crops growing stronger, the animals less restless. It was as if the soil understood what humans often forgot, that care created life and cruelty, only destruction. One evening a storm rolled in, sudden and fierce. Thunder cracked overhead and rain poured down hard against the roof. Ayanna startled awake, memories rising fast. Ethan moved without thinking, sitting beside her, steady and present. She clutched his sleeve, grounding herself in the now. When the storm passed, they remained there, listening to the quiet that followed, deeper and softer than before. In that moment, Ethan realized he no longer saw Ayanna as someone he had saved, but as someone who had saved him as well from a life fading into nothing. The thought frightened and warmed him in equal measure. They spoke then honestly of the future. Ethan said she was free to leave if she ever wished, that he would not stop her. Ayanna answered that freedom was not only the absence of chains, but the presence of choice, and that she chose to stay. The words settled between them, gentle and powerful. Neither named what was growing, but it was there, undeniable. Trust had become affection, and affection was slowly turning into something deeper, shaped by respect and shared healing. That night, as the fire burned low, Ethan understood that the man who lived with silence was gone. In his place stood someone learning again how to live with another soul beside him. Ayanna lay resting peacefully, and for the first time in years, Ethan slept without fear of waking alone. Outside, the world remained harsh and uncertain, but within the farm 2 broken paths were no longer running parallel. They were beginning to walk forward together toward a future neither had dared imagine, but both were ready to face. The change between Ethan and Ayanna became visible not in grand moments, but in the smallest details of daily life. They moved around each other with ease, now sharing space without hesitation or fear. Mornings began with quiet greetings, and evenings ended by the fire where stories replaced silence. Ayanna's laughter came softly at first, as if she were testing whether the sound was allowed to exist. Each time it appeared, Ethan felt something warm and unfamiliar settle in his chest. He realized that the farm was no longer just land and labor, but a place shaped by care and shared intention. It had become a home not because of walls or fences, but because 2 wounded people had chosen to remain and heal together. The outside world, however, did not rest. One afternoon, a stranger rode in without invitation, his posture stiff and his eyes sharp. He spoke of law and ownership, claiming the purchase of an Apache woman was no different from buying cattle. Ethan felt anger rise hot and dangerous, but kept his voice steady. He told the man plainly that Ayanna was not owned by anyone and that she stayed by choice. The stranger laughed, calling Ethan foolish and warning him that trouble would come for defying the rules of the West. Ayanna stood beside Ethan, her presence calm and unwavering. She spoke then, her voice steady, saying she was no one's property and that she would not be taken again. The man saw something in her eyes and in Ethan's stance that made him think twice. He left with threats unspoken, but understood. The line had been drawn. That night fear pressed close, but neither of them turned away from it. Ethan admitted that protecting this life they were building might cost him everything, including his land and his safety. Ayanna listened, then said softly that her people believed a life without dignity was not worth surviving. She told him she would not ask him to sacrifice his future for her sake. Ethan answered that the choice had already been made the moment he refused to look away in town. He said that some things once seen could not be unseen, and some choices once made defined who a person truly was. Ayanna reached for his hand, then not in desperation, but in shared resolve. The touch felt natural, as if it had always belonged there. In the days that followed, they prepared quietly. Ethan reinforced doors and checked sightlines while Ayanna learned the land even more deeply, showing him places he had never noticed where the earth dipped or rose in ways that could protect or reveal. She moved with confidence, no longer the exhausted woman he had first met, but someone reclaiming strength, piece by piece. He admired her resilience, and she admired his steadiness. Love grew there slowly, not rushed or claimed, but earned through shared labor, trust, and truth. It was not a love born of rescue, but of recognition, 2 souls seeing each other fully, scars and all, and choosing to stay. One evening, as the sun set in deep gold, Ayanna shared a story of her people about choosing a place to belong. She said home was not where one was born, but where one's spirit rested without fear. Ethan listened, understanding more than words could say. He realized his spirit had been restless for years, wandering through loss and regret. Now, with Ayanna beside him, it had begun to rest. The thought did not frighten him. It felt right. When she finished speaking, Ethan told her that she was no longer a guest on the farm, but a partner in it, that whatever came they would face together. Ayanna smiled, not wide or dramatic, but real and certain. In that moment, something settled into place between them, unbreakable and clear. Trouble came sooner than hoped, but not as expected. A group of riders approached the farm one morning, not with weapons raised, but with caution. They had heard stories of the farmer who protected an Apache woman and expected violence. Instead, they found a calm man and a woman who stood openly at his side. Words were exchanged, tense but honest. Ethan made it clear that no harm would come from his land, and none would be tolerated toward it. Some riders left unconvinced, others thoughtful. The West was changing slowly, painfully, and resistance met resistance. But even that small moment mattered. It showed that fear did not always win. As seasons shifted, the farm flourished. Crops grew stronger, animals healthier, and the land responded to care given freely. Ethan and Ayanna worked side by side, planning, planting, repairing, and dreaming. They spoke of building a larger house, of teaching children someday the ways of the land and respect. These dreams were fragile but real, and they treated them gently, allowing them to grow without pressure. Love found its place, naturally woven into shared purpose and trust. At night they rested together, not in haste but in peace. The past still lived in memory, but it no longer ruled the present. 1 year after the day they met, Ethan stood at the edge of the field, watching Ayanna move confidently through the land. He thought of the man he had been before, silent, isolated, waiting for life to end quietly. He understood now that survival alone was not living, and that love was not weakness but courage given form. Ayanna joined him, taking his hand without hesitation. She said she had once believed she was the last of her people, left behind, unwanted and forgotten. Now she knew she was part of something living and chosen. Ethan answered that she had not been bought, but welcomed, and that the home they built belonged to them both. The story traveled as stories do, changing shape with each telling. Some said a farmer bought an Apache woman and found redemption. Others said an Apache woman claimed a land and a heart through strength alone. The truth lived quietly between them, in shared work, shared silence, and shared love. In the harsh world of the Wild West, where cruelty often decided fate, Ethan Cole and Ayanna chose a different path. They chose dignity over fear, choice over chains, and love over loneliness. And in doing so, they turned a forgotten farm into a legend, not of ownership, but of belonging, freely chosen and fiercely defended.